Welcome to Nick's Mix and Flicks, the podcast where we talk music and movie reviews and other stuff too. And I'm joined today by my brother, Justin.
How's it going? Happy to be here.
Glad to have you, man. Let's get into it. Yeah, when I hear music, got to talk about it. Got me a collection of movies that I can watch a lot of. If that's not your suit, at least try it on for a fit. You gotta tune into this Nick's Mix and Flicks. Today's album we're going to be reviewing is White Blood Cells by the White Stripes.
Music time!
We kind of talked a little bit beforehand. So listening to this album over and over again kind of burnt me out from listening to it. I don't know how long it's going to be before I listen to this album willingly again.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was a really good album for me at first, and then I think I listened to it way too many times.
Yeah, 2 or 3 too many times for me personally. In 2001, the same year of the major national tragedy that involved the band Nickelback releasing their album Silver Side Up, the garage and blues rock band The White Stripes released their album White Blood Cells. The title in reference to the press and attention that the band was receiving. Jack White explained it like an infection coming towards them. The band consists of 2 members, Jack and Meg White, a divorced couple who were often mistaken as siblings. I remember my first experience with the White Stripes. Justin, do you remember yours?
Yeah, mine was with Seven Nation Army, which is probably a lot of people's first experience with the White Stripes.
Yeah. I think like halfway through the album, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about Seven Nation Army. My first experience with the White Stripes came from
I know where you're going with this.
the 2004 now cult classic film Napoleon Dynamite. Is that what you were expecting?
Yep, I have it
And
in my notes.
the song We're Going to Be Friends features in the opening credits sequence, which has been engraved into my mind for the better part of about 15 years. I know we used to watch it like all the time. The 3 of us, me, you, and then our sister Lauren, we used to watch it a ton.
Yeah, we even had a year for Halloween. Well, I don't remember if you and Lola were involved, but I had a year with my friends for Halloween that we dressed up as the Napoleon Dynamite characters. Not that that's related to the album, but
Right. Who are you?
I was Napoleon.
Idiot!
But yeah, we are going to be friends. Agreed. Definitely cemented in my head. I can't listen to that song without thinking about the red curly hair on
Yeah.
Napoleon Dynamite's head.
Yeah, and the different foods in the opening sequence, like
Yep.
the corn dog,
The tater
I think
tots.
the tater tots. I think there's a stick of chapstick with like one of the production assistants' name on it or something.
Yep. Which is funny because listening to this album, there were a couple of other tracks that I feel would have fit the Napoleon Dynamite movie pretty well.
Definitely. But thanks to that movie, I've also known who the White Stripes are, and at least one song from this album from for the better part of 15 years as well. Speaking of songs from the album, let's get into the review. So the album starts off with the track Dead Leaves and the Dirty Ground. This was just like such an epic way to kick it off. It kind of blows my mind that 2 people with 2 instruments can create like this much energy.
Yeah, agreed. I felt that way through a lot of the album,
Yeah.
realizing that there's only 2, just Jack and his ex-wife, Meg,
Yeah.
in this whole band. It sounds like there's a lot more people in the band
It does.
through most of the album.
The lyrics are interesting because it reads like a love song, but the melody and rhythm like feels like an anthem almost.
Yeah, agreed.
And yeah, so in my notes here, I said this song reminds me, oh yeah, these are the people that wrote and performed Seven Nation Army.
Yep.
There is one song that this song reminds me of. It's not a White Stripes song. It's a band called Slightly Stoopid. Stupid is spelled Stoopid. But they have a song called Closer to the Sun from their album, also called Closer to the Sun. Kind of like the just like the quick guitar kind of sound. It
Yeah.
kind of was reminiscent of that. So if you have heard of that song and have not heard of this song, I recommend check out Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground and or check out Closer to the Sun by Slightly Stoopid. But for me, we're going to start off the album with a 7 out of 10 for this song.
Nice. I, like you, had this song marked at a 7 out of 10.
Wow. Look at that.
So insane.
It's in our DNA probably
Probably.
because we're literally related.
Literally.
Literally. So that's going to bring us into our second track, Hotel Yorba. What are your thoughts on this one?
So Hotel Yorba, it's a good song. I like this song a lot. Some notes I have down here for this song is it's a fun song, fun to sing along with. Feels like it belongs in a movie where a young couple is in the early days of love and they don't even know it yet.
That is so
And
cute.
it makes you kind of want to. I'm not much of a dancer. I know you like to dance, but
Yeah.
this song makes me want to dance a little bit.
I think Jack White, one of his biggest music influences is Bob Dylan.
Okay,
And
interesting.
and the song kind of felt like a Bob Dylan folk song, like banjo and overalls on a porch type,
Yeah,
kind of vibe. Like you said, the dancing. I listen to the song and I bounce my leg and kind of swing my head back and forth. Like, I whip my hair back and forth. Like Willow Smith.
yeah, exactly
The
like
song
that.
makes me feel like Willow Smith. Low key. Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground and Hotel Yorba, they sound super different, but I feel like that's good because it kind of displays like, hey, this is the kind of music you're gonna hear from this album. You'll have like the rock heavy songs like Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground, and then kind of the more chill, folky songs like Hotel Yorba. So Jack White with this album, his intention was to write these songs with kind of a sense of like childlike innocence. A lot of these songs have very like simple, not like complicated lyrics.
That's an interesting point that you make about thought process behind making this album because I didn't know that, but the lyric that I have written down from Hotel Yorba that really stuck out to me reads, "It might sound silly for me to think childish thoughts like these, but
Yeah,
I'm so tired of acting tough and I'm going to do what I please." Like you were saying, it's a very simple line. It's not anything groundbreaking. There's no double or triple entendres here that we're trying to break down out of these lyrics, but it's a very relatable lyric.
definitely. This song I gave a 6.5 out of 10.
Hey, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10.
Holy moly, that is so close. Moving to this next track here.
Yeah, so the next track on the album is "I'm Finding It Harder to Be a Gentleman." Yeah, I get it. Sometimes it's tough
Same.
to be a gentleman.
Yeah,
So I feel you, Jack. I feel you.
I feel
I don't know if you
brother.
still feel that way. It's been a long time, but
Yeah,
if you do, I feel you. One of the notes I have here for the track "I'm Finding It Harder to Be a Gentleman." Fairly deep lyrics in this song, simple
Yeah.
but describes what I think a lot of I said guys deal with, but I think probably just in general what a lot of people deal with. Sometimes it's hard to be a gentleman or to be nice. Other people sometimes make it difficult to be nice, but
absolutely.
obviously it's best to be nice.
Yeah.
One of the lyrics I have written down here, "Have a doctor come and visit us and tell us which one is sane."
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that one.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not really sure I have anything else to say on that.
Yeah, no, it is. And one side you have Jack, in his perspective of people who think like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to be, like decent these days. And then you have the people who are like, well, how come you're not decent to me? It's like, well, because you don't make it easy to be decent to you.
Yep.
And then those people probably would rebut and say like, well, it's not my job to make it easy, to be decent to me.
Yep.
But yeah, so then it's like, why don't we get a doctor in here and tell us which one is sane, like which one of us is the correct one here?
Yeah, which on that note and on that line, it almost feels like that he's saying from his perspective, like, I know I'm the sane one.
Yeah,
So let's have a doctor come in and tell us that I'm the sane one. But it's kind of
right.
a crapshoot, right? You have somebody come in to determine which one is sane or who is sane in the group
Yeah.
of whatever you're doing. It's a crapshoot. You may be the one that's not sane.
And I do, as simple as the lyrics on this album are, I do feel like Jack White knows that people think this deeply about these songs because he did as a songwriter. You kind of, if you're someone like Jack White, you don't just write songs, write words on a paper that rhyme. Like you put intention behind your lyrics. And so I think that for this song, Jack White, knew, this is kind of like the basic concept and I'll kind of get this down, but, there are other things. And he probably felt deeper about it, but just didn't go into great detail.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, Jack definitely seems like a very intellectual, deep thinker.
Definitely.
While I was listening to this album over the last little while and trying to learn a little bit about the White Stripes, I stumbled across their Nardwar interviews on
Yeah,
YouTube.
I watched that one too. Yeah.
And usually Nardwar gets people to bite and gets a lot of emotion out of them. But Jack didn't seem to be all that bothered by
Right.
Nardwar's weird out of pocket questions. Because I don't think Jack really. I'm not sure if it was that he didn't care, but he just seems like a very deep thinker and probably didn't want to feed into it a whole lot. But
Definitely. I thought their Nardwar interview was interesting because they were probably the most like low level of energy Nardwar interview I've ever seen.
agreed.
And for those of you who don't know Nardwar, he is I guess he's like technically a journalist, a music journalist, but
Yeah.
he's been working in music and radio I think for a long, long time, and he has a YouTube channel where he does interviews with artists. They'll go to like music festivals and stuff. I like that this song kind of displays that keeping things simple and working to explore creatively, like within a tight bound. That's super interesting to me. You know, it could be interesting to go and expand on every single thought and every single word, but I feel like it takes more discipline and honestly kind of creativity to be as broad as this song, you know, and as the White Stripes, and still be like as creative as they are.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're exactly right. I think it's probably easier to get fancy with your words, to use bigger words and have deep meaning than it is to keep it simple and still have deep meaning.
100%. Yeah. For me, this song got an 8 out of 10, which is my highest song so far.
Nice. I have this at a 7.5 as well, just like I
Okay.
had Hotel Yorba.
Hotel Yorba. Nice, nice. Well, this next song, Fell in Love with the Girl. I knew of this song. I had no idea what the lyrics were until I looked it up because the vocals on this song, you can like barely hear them. That's probably on purpose. Again, kind of like with that childish perspective and innocent perspective on love and relationships. I think the second line, it says, I fell in love once and almost completely. That's a sentiment that I can relate to a lot. As a young lad, I always had like crushes on girls, and I would always fall like super deep and quick into what I thought was love at a young age. I think he kind of elaborates on the song saying like something misleading. I think he says the word misleading in the song. And yeah, and those feelings sometimes are definitely misleading because you think like, oh, I'm 14 years old and I'm in love with this girl and I have it all figured out. But then you realize it's like, no.
Yeah, I think this track is it's a fun song. The notes I have written down are Blitzkrieg bop kind of feel from the Ramones. There's a lot going on in regards to instrumentals.
Yeah,
And yeah, the lyrics were a little bit tough to hear, but when you do know what they're saying, it's a good song. I liked it.
definitely. Yeah, I liked it too. I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's super fun.
I had this track ranked at a 6.8.
Okay. Okay. 6.8.
And
Very
I
specific.
think
I like it.
I think we may rank our music and stuff a little bit differently. I know you've seen the way I have mine broken down.
Yeah.
And really the only thing that's dragging this track down for me is the replay value.
Okay.
I'm not sure this is a song I would listen to a lot if it came up on a smart shuffle, for example. I'd probably
Gotcha.
skip it more often than not.
For me, if I'm in the car driving around and this comes on, I feel like I'm in like a chase scene in a movie. Like I want to put the pedal through the freaking floor and just go crazy. So I feel like this song gives me like adrenaline. So I think that's why I like it more. But
A little bit of a different vibe.
yeah, with I'm finding it harder to be a gentleman and this song, I had a note here that it felt like I was just in a small local concert venue just with the band. Like just sound engineering wise, there's not even a ton of perfection or like filters or stuff like that. Kind of just feels plain. With the last two songs, I felt like that. But the next song, Expecting, I feel like I'm in the studio with them. Like I'm sandwiched in between the amp connected to Jack's guitar and Meg's drum set. I feel like I am right in between them. Is this the one where Meg just plays like one, not note, but just like one cymbal the entire song? Or
Yeah,
is that it?
yeah.
This is that one?
I believe so, yeah. It starts out
Okay.
with just a single strum of a guitar note, and then the cymbal comes in, and it's a little, not completely offbeat, and I know it's done intentionally, but it's even a little, the timing is a little strange. It's a little different,
Yeah.
which I actually like.
Yeah, me too. In my research, I found that apparently there's an opinion that Meg White, her drumming was like not super popular when the White Stripes were kind of coming up because people criticized it to be like super simple and like dumbed down. But there are also a lot of drummers and artists that praise her drumming because it is so simple, but it's purposely simple and it's, you know, it's simple, but it's effective. Like her drumming gets what needs to be done, it gets that done.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that goes back to kind of what we've been talking about the White Stripes on this entire record is just that
Yeah,
they're simple, but they make great music.
definitely. And I think part of it too is like that raw sound, because we live in a day and age, and we have for a long time, of like digitally advanced and assisted music. To hear just something as like bone dry as this track is so refreshing. I think I was like getting giddy listening to it for the first time, because I was like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the song itself is good and very on par with the rest of the track list so far. I give this song an 8 out of 10.
I gave it a 7.5 out of 10.
There we go. You heard it here first, 7.5. Okay, so we got to talk about this next track, Little Room. Right off the bat, there's no guitar, right?
Just the drum. Sounds like the hi-hat is let loose a little bit. It's
Yeah,
just being tapped on the edge of the hi-hat.
yeah.
It could even be a tambourine. I'm not really 100%
Oh, okay,
sure,
okay.
but
For those of you who don't know, Justin used to drum in middle school and into high school. Was it into high school or just middle school?
mostly middle school.
Okay.
For fun in high school. I didn't do anything for school. But
Gotcha. He's our in-house drum expert, so
I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate
well,
that.
I would go that far. I would go farther, actually.
Thanks, brother.
But you're welcome, brother. This song is what, like 45 seconds long, and yeah, listening to it, I think I just had like the goofiest smile on my face the entire time. So I feel like this is a good time to also bring up this company, this store called Third Man Records. So Third Man Records is owned and was created by Jack White, and it's got 3 locations, one in Nashville, one in Detroit, and then one in London. Originally, Jack White just wanted kind of a space, like a storage unit basically, to store all of his tour gear, like in between shows and stuff. And then he thought, hey, let's kind of amp it up a little bit. Let's put like a store in the front. And then it was like, okay, well, let's put a studio in the back too. So then now it's kind of expanded to this whole thing. And the whole time I was listening to him talk about this little room, I was like, oh, he's talking about his like storage unit, like his storage facility. Yeah, because he says when you're in your little room and you're working on something good, but if it's really good, you're gonna need a bigger room. It just has to be in reference to him talking about the little room that he started in and then made it a bigger room. And then, if you're working on something good, you're going to need that bigger room. But then he even says, and when you're in the bigger room, you might not know what to do. And you might have to think about how you got started sitting in your little room. I feel like it's like the cycle of fame and success almost. It's like you start small, you work hard, and then you make your achievements. You get all these awards and, all this notoriety. But for you as the artist, you kind of just go back and think of like how you got started. You might not always just be thinking about, oh, I have all this stuff right now, or I have, this much money. Like you just kind of think about the process of it all.
Yeah, I also had the same insight when looking into this track. Must be that DNA thing. Honestly, I didn't even remember this, but this is so far the highest ranked song I have on the record.
Interesting.
At an 8.
Okay. The first 8 from Justin. What made it an 8 over, let's say, like a 7.5?
I think I liked that it was short.
Yeah.
And the story that is that sounds mean, and I don't mean it that way. It's not that I want to
like
hear
that there was
less.
less music from
Yeah,
the White Stripes.
It's not that I want to hear less of the White Stripes, but I like the story that was told in the 50 seconds that they told it in. And I do appreciate the simplistic drums in it. I think we'll probably end up coming back to that again 1 or 2 more times throughout this album. But Meg, I know you're not really in the music scene anymore. You've kind of gone and done whatever it is that makes you happy. But if by some chance you hear this, your simplicity is appreciated.
Absolutely. Very well done, Meg. Yeah, I love the story of the song. It's simple, but it's effective. It does what it needs to do. So you gave this song an 8 out of 10. I give this one a 7 out of 10. So we're going to move on to the next song, The Union Forever. So The Union Forever, looking into the lyrics, I discovered each line is pretty much just exclusively quotes from the movie Citizen Kane, which honestly kind of makes me knock this track down a few points right off the bat. I get the idea of repurposing art to make it into a different form of art. I just feel like there wasn't much for me as a listener here. And I feel like even sound wise, it was a bit kind of drawn out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have this one ranked pretty low on my list as well. Yeah, I don't know what it was about it. I actually didn't know that it was essentially just a bunch of quotes from Citizen Kane. But yeah, it was just one of those songs on the album that just didn't really do it for me. When I first listened to it, I didn't mind it, but as we talked about, we listened to this album a number of times, and I think
Yeah.
this is the point in the album. Not saying that there aren't still great songs from here on out, but this is kind of the point in the album that I found myself getting to where I started to feel slightly burned out.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally agree. For the rest of the album, I don't have anything that's like super high. The thoughts that I just shared, I kind of had those written down halfway through the song, and then I listened to the rest of it, trying to think like in the context of Citizen Kane. So I'm gonna go Citizen Kane tinfoil hat theory here real quick. So in the film Citizen Kane, spoilers by the way if you haven't seen it, but in the film, Rosebud is the name of Charles Foster Kane's sled that he has or that he had as a child, and it's his last words on his deathbed. He's like, Rosebud.
Rosebud.
And the whole movie's about figuring out what the F Rosebud means. It's revealed that it's this toy sled that he had as a child that he used to play with. He was kind of like reminiscing on his old childhood, the thing that connected him to his childhood. Which, if you're catching on to a theme here, again, which is what this album is kind of about with the simplistic writing style, is kind of tapping into that childlike kind of state of mind. Still, I don't have it ranked high, but I do at least appreciate a little bit more. Kind of like if that's the purpose behind it, written like this, then I think it's pretty cool. I also don't know if there's connection with Rosebud, rose, the color red, and the film is in black and white because it's old. It makes me think about, the album cover, which is red, black, and white. That's the color scheme of almost the entire White Stripes discography is like red, black, and white. So I don't know if there's connection there, but I got a 5.5 for this song.
I have a 5.5 as well.
Yeah, I wasn't super impressed. And yeah, like you said, at this point, I was kind of like, okay, interesting where we're going now. And that kind of continued, especially on the next track titled The Same Boy You've Always Known. I didn't rate this one high. I think I gave it a 6. But I could not tell for the first, I think, listen or two if I thought this song was about like a failed relationship or someone that Jack White knew with like dementia, because he says like, you fell down, forgot my name, of course, pretty tough to think about. The same boy you've always known. So I was like, okay, is he talking about like a relative of his that fell down and, forgot his name, and it's tough to think about? And, it's like, hey, yo, it's me. I'm the same boy you've always known. I do think I lean more towards like the past relationship side of things with lyrics like, you're looking down again, and then you look me over, we're laying down again on a blanket in the clover. Feels like super romantic and kind of probably a little bit out of place if he's singing about like a grandparent or a relative with dementia.
Yeah, he says in the song at one point, the same boy you've always known, well, I guess I haven't grown. So interesting insight there from you on the whole possible dementia-ridden relative.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, I would lean towards it being about probably a failed relationship due to
Yeah.
him not growing up and maturing, which ties into, again, the whole record being from a childish perspective,
Yeah.
but in kind of a different way,
Yeah.
not so much as a innocent childish perspective, but a childish perspective of immaturity.
You could be a 30-year-old and still have a childlike perspective, on love and relationships.
Yep.
There are people that are just at different levels of understanding. So I think that's, talking about that now seems like, oh yeah, like that's cool, that they wrote it like that, because then it's like relatable to everybody, not just children, basically. Like everyone kind of goes through stuff like this. But what you said about the failed relationship, like almost on his part, because he refused to kind of grow up and mature, brings me to a thought that I had just listening to the album. I feel like the way he writes is very interesting, because it almost seems like he's not writing as like one main character. He's writing as like almost a secondary character to someone else's main character story, which I think shows a lot in the next track, We're Going to Be Friends, the one we talked about in the beginning. But before we do that, I did give this song a 6 out of 10.
As did I.
Nothing crazy for me. I just thought it was okay.
Yeah, same.
Back to We're Going to Be Friends. This song just like exudes nostalgia. Like we said before, this was probably the first White Stripes song I ever heard, even before knowing who the White Stripes were. I've always had like a mental music video for this song in my head. I'm not going to share details because I'm not giving that away for free. If there's a motion picture production company listening, I'll sell you the idea, but I'm not giving that away for free.
Yeah, I've definitely heard his mental picture of the music video that would be for this song, and it is worth it. So open your wallets, people.
Yeah, come on. Let me make this my full-time gig, please. Anyway, the actual music video is a lot less complex than what I was like thinking in my head. Yeah, it's literally just Jack and Meg. I think Meg's asleep on a couch.
The
Jack's
entire
sitting
time.
the entire time. Jack is playing the guitar, and they're just on a lawn. And I'm pretty sure the house that they're in front of, I'm pretty sure is Jack's home. At least at that time, his house like in Detroit. Because they came out of Detroit. I don't know if they're both from there, but I know they came like out of Detroit. So I'm pretty sure that that's Jack's house in the background. But
Yeah, then he just kind of nudges her at the end when he's done, wakes her up, and then
yeah,
it ends. But yeah, I agree with you. Lots of nostalgia. Little bit of a different insight for me on this song. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Seven Nation Army is the first song I ever heard by them. Still love that song to this day. But that song came out a year before Napoleon Dynamite came out. And I had watched Napoleon Dynamite, I couldn't tell you how many times before I even knew that We're Going to Be Friends was by the White Stripes. I didn't even know that they had any other music. I thought they were kind of a one-hit wonder for quite some time. But yeah, it's a good track. This is one that I have ranked fairly high. I've got it at a 7.7, just with the nostalgia mixed in of the movie. And it's just a nice simple song, and I like again, going back to the childish perspective, it feels like the story of a kid. He talks about playing with bugs and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. It's like two little kids
mm-hmm.
who are friends growing up, and they may or may not be falling in love as at a young age, but
yeah.
they're friends.
Yeah.
It's a fun song.
It is, and the music video, because Meg's asleep the whole time, kind of makes it feel like a lullaby almost, where it's like he's singing it to Meg to make her go sleepy. But I think this is honestly one of the most like sentimental songs ever written. I don't know what other songs would be on that list, but I do know this one would be one of them. For me, I give this track a 7 out of 10.
Very nice.
All right, this next track, Offend in Every Way, very bluesy song, like a foot tapper. Like I said again, like on a porch with a rocking chair and overalls, and there's just a field of hay in front of you. That's what this song feels like to me. Kind of brings up like an interesting perspective in reference to the title of the album with the white blood cells and like the press kind of, becoming like an infection to them at this point in their career. Offend in Every Way is kind of him saying like, hey, I'm going to offend the media as much as I can in every way just because I know that they're listening on everything. But also from the perspective of the media, in their mind, they have to also go on the offense because they have to actively be searching for things to talk about and looking for tabloids, clickbait titles and stuff like that. I have right here my last note is it's okay that the media can say whatever they want, but if, an artist or a public figure, in this case, Jack and, Meg, if they share their opinion, then, people just automatically get offended, the media included. But
yeah, I think Jack definitely doesn't want to fit the mold. Not that he's trying too hard to be different, but he definitely seems like he wants to be different. He doesn't want to fall in line like a lamb being led to the slaughter. He wants to do things his way, and I commend him for it. You do you, Jack.
For Offend in Every Way, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think just because I really like the energy. Again, like a very foot tapper. So I gave it an 8 just based on the energy alone.
I had it at a 6.5. I think just because it's just another one of those ones that I enjoyed it, but probably wouldn't listen to it a lot again.
Yeah, and even with the 8, I don't think this has a high replay value for myself. This album is also making me realize that I love blues music. Like, I really like it, I think.
That's cool that it did that for you.
Yeah, thank you, Jack and Meg. Megan, I don't know, just Meg probably.
I think it just, yeah.
Megan and Jack Word.
Who knows? She's not gonna
Who
know.
knows? Yeah, she ain't gonna tell us. This next song, so it's titled I Think I Smell a Rat. My dad joke coded brain thought it was titled I Think I Smell a Fart for a second when I first looked at it. And then I looked at it again and I was like, oh, that says rat. Just my silly brain going to work there. But this song is me when I think I smell a rat. This is what I say. I'm just like, I think I smell a rat.
A rat!
It low-key reminded me of the Drake and Kendrick beef where there was like an alleged leak in Drake's camp, like feeding Kendrick's side information. Like, hey, yo, I smell a rat. I saw one theory online that someone thought that this song could be about like middle to upper class kids and their upbringings, like acting like delinquents, you know, with the quote unquote rat being like the impressionist of these kids pretending to be someone they aren't, you know, because I think there's like a line later where it says like you walk all over your parents or something.
Yeah.
And so someone relates that to like these kids walk all over their parents, blah, blah, blah. I think it's like half true. I don't know that that's 100% the purpose of the song and why it was written, but I could see how someone took that away from it. Honestly, this is just kind of a song I don't fully understand, but I think it's a cool sounding song. So for the sound, I gave it a 6.5.
I gave it a 6.5 as well, mainly for the sound too. I liked the guitar in it, and I did like Jack's inflection in his voice every time he says the word rat. How he kind of goes high. It's a little silly, but
It is, yeah, it was pretty silly.
so when I heard this song, when I listened to this song for the first time, I don't know why, but I worked in pest control for a little while.
Yeah.
I get the sense from Jack when he wrote this song that he may have had a little bit of pent up anger in him. And I immediately had the smell of a dead rat in my head,
Interesting.
which would always make me really angry. So I can relate to him on that scale.
Yeah, 6.5. Yeah, again, just kind of for the energy.
Yep.
Which will bring us to possibly one of the worst songs I've ever heard. Definitely my least favorite songs on this album. This track titled Aluminum, or if you're one of our friends across the pond, Aluminium, or if you're Andy Dwyer from Parks and Recreation, Aluminum. You know, with this album, someone online said that the White Stripes aren't about what they say, but how they say it. But it's kind of hard to talk about what they say when the one lyric, the entire song is ah.
I agree with you 100%. This is perhaps the worst song I've ever heard in my life. My notes for this song says literally just sounds like a sheet of aluminum waving or shaking for 2 minutes and 19 seconds.
Maybe that's their intention, but
Maybe.
you know, I just don't understand it. I don't get it.
I do not either. And
But
whatever thread you read where the person was saying it's not about the lyrics, yeah, that person's wrong. This song
Yeah.
sucks. It's terrible. I hated
I
listening
gave
to it every time.
okay. The instruments are cool. I'm giving it a 3.5. I would go lower, but I feel like they still managed to have like kind of a punchy attitude with just the instruments. That's the only reason I'm giving this a 3.5. Otherwise, I'd probably go like 2.
Yeah, I gave it a 2.4, and I'm not even sure why I gave it that.
Which is kind of a shame because up to this point, I was like, I'd kind of actually really like this album.
Same.
And then this happened, and I was like, well, this is going to bring down my ranking quite a bit.
Yep.
What do we have? We have 4 more songs, and a couple of them are lower rated for me too. But no, yeah, this is just, I don't know what that was.
And you know what, Jack and Meg, if there is a meaning behind this song, I sure would love to have the intellectual ability to know it one day so I
Yeah.
can appreciate it. But for now, it's just not going to happen.
They need to do like a genius lyric breakdown.
Yeah.
'Cause, you know,
Yeah.
how they have to like, they have to sing it in the studio,
Yep.
and Jack's just like, ah.
Yeah.
And then he's just talking. He's just like, yeah, so that's just me screaming. And
Yeah.
then it's ah, and he was like, yeah, so that's me actually screaming again. I feel like that's
This-
probably how that would go.
This is my impression of a sheet of aluminum waving in the
Yeah.
wind.
And it goes a little something like this.
Terrible track. Let's move on.
Okay, yes. Let's move on to the next song, I Can't Wait, which was me to listening to Aluminum thinking, I can't wait to stop listening to this song. This is word for word from my notes. The first line for this song, it says, this song is super duper poopy catchy, like holy flip, what the heck? We'll just move on from that line, but we'll get into the actual thoughts. I think halfway through, there's almost like a chant in the lyrics where it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if it goes exactly like that. Something like that. Listening to the song a few times, I would find myself singing along to that part. That's really it, but I like it quite a bit. Of the tracks so far, this one was like more of the complete sounding ones. Feels to me like there's a point to make, and lyrically, I feel like they deliver on that point. And I feel like production-wise, this is even one of their more complete sounding songs.
The song I Can't Wait is mostly about him essentially waiting for a girl that he lost to somebody else, it looks like, through listening and reading the lyrics, to come running back to him. My interpretation's a bit off, but that's pretty much what I gathered from it.
Yeah.
Which can again be lined up with the whole sentiment of this album of a kind of childish perspective on love. I could see a kid who has a crush on a girl just being like, "Oh, I'll just wait for her to come back," because that's what he thinks is going to happen because he
100%,
is
yeah.
naive and doesn't
Yeah.
understand that it might not happen. I gave this song a 6.7, mostly because I like the sound of it. I like the instruments. I liked the music.
Yeah, like you were saying, that perspective of like, well, she's with someone else right now, or she's just not here right now, so I'll just wait, I'll just wait for her to come back. Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for her to come back to me. I do have a note here at about 30 seconds left of the song. I don't know if it's technically like a solo, but Jack kind of goes crazy on the guitar, and I really like that part. I probably would give it about a 6.5, but that guitar part towards the end gives headbanger energy. And so, honestly, just from that guitar part, I gave it a 7.5. But again, without the guitar solo-ish thing, I'd probably give it a 6.5 or a 7. Now, we finna talk about this next song, Now Mary. I feel like the White Stripes have like such a wide variety of sounds, from blues to headbanging rock to a low-key country and folk feel. I feel like that folk sound comes through here on this track a lot, while being drowned out at times with heavy guitar and like disrespectful drumming from Meg. Again, I feel like this song feels like it needs to be experienced in person with a band like right in front of you at a show or something.
I could see that. It would definitely be a fun live song. This song's got a great sound to it. Melody's great. This song is what made me realize and make a note that I have for the album in its entirety in regards to sound. And some fans of these bands may not like this, but the three bands that kept coming to mind as I listened to this song were Kaleo. I don't know if you know who they are. They have a song called Hot Blood that I think most people know. It's got kind of a grungy garage rock kind of feel. Kaleo, Jet, and the Beatles. This song here is, like I said, what made me first think like I could see like the Beatles performing this song.
It's almost like if they switched the electric guitar out for just an acoustic one, then it would sound like a Beatles song. Kind of with like the theme of not inappropriate, but like toxic and kind of just naive perspectives on relationships. It sounds like this Mary person is pretty insufferable to deal with. And so I don't blame whoever is singing about Mary for leaving Mary, because she sounds kind of horrible, low-key. But again, it is a very enjoyable listen. I found it easy to nod my head along to. So overall, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
I did like it. I did give it a 6.
We're on the second to last track of the album. This one titled I Can Learn. And we seem to kind of continue with the theme of toxic, unhealthy relationships. I think right at this point in the album when I was listening to it is when I felt like the whole relationship thing was kind of starting to drag out a little bit, which is kind of a shame because I like love the first half of this album. I got to the point where I was thinking, hey, I get it. I get the point of these songs. I didn't feel like this song necessarily had to be about relationships again, and probably the same relationship that gets brought up in other songs. But for me, I kind of felt like this one wasn't necessarily necessary, and I don't know that that's an issue I have with this track necessarily, but just kind of the album as a whole. Well executed up to this point, but I feel like it's like it's been dragged out a little bit, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. I had a hard time getting through these last few tracks, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I felt the same way. I felt like I was kind of listening to the same song over and over again, which unfortunately led me to kind of get bored. And so it's unfortunate because I was super excited listening to this album in its entirety for the first time in preparation for this episode. And once I got 4 or 5 songs in, I was like, all right, this is going to be good. The
Yep.
last track, Now Mary, is about when I hit, well, let's be honest, Aluminum is garbage. But
Yeah.
that's Aluminum is really when I started to feel the fall off. Now I'm almost to the point where I'm like, okay, when is this album going to be done?
Yeah. Which the good news is we only have one more song to talk about. But yeah, like you said, with Aluminum, I think my least favorite part about that track, the sound aside, is that it took me out from the album and like from the story. It's like if you're watching a movie and there's like really bad acting, like mentally it takes you out from the story and you're now
Yeah.
focusing on how bad the acting is. That's my holdup with Aluminum is I just feel like it takes me out of the experience of listening to this album like chronologically, which is personally my favorite way to listen to albums, but not ruined, but like kind of tainted that approach for me a little bit. I was kind of just counting down the tracks, like you said, thinking like, how much longer is this album?
Yeah, yeah. And which is an interesting thought, really, because I feel like had they put Aluminum at the end, I may have enjoyed these last 5 tracks a bit more. I gave I Can Learn a 6.
I gave it a 6.5, which will finally bring us to our last track of this album titled This Protector. I was going to say I hope we close the album out on a strong note, but I think that the point of this closing track is that it's not some, big epic orchestral closer. It's just literally a simple song with, I assume, Jack on the piano and he and Meg both sing in this.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I'm pretty sure this whole album, this is the only time that we hear Meg sing,
Yeah, I think you're right.
unless she's like drowned out in some kind of background vocals in another song. But this is like the only time we like strongly hear her voice. They sing about this unnamed protector who is hearing sounds by the door, through the floor, and around, galore. Maybe I just don't get it. I don't know.
I don't get it either. So if there is somebody out there who gets it, please explain
Please
it.
let us know.
Yeah, it'd be great to be on the inside part of this joke.
But yeah, kind of a, again, I think an intentionally weak closer, but that doesn't change the fact that it is a weak closer. I gave this song a 5.
I gave it a 5.5.
Yeah, not my favorite way to close out an album, especially with the high energy that we heard kind of in the first half. It makes the White Stripes a very intriguing band for me. I think the story of how they came to be alone is super intriguing, but I did thoroughly enjoy the album. I was entertained with its sounds, theme, and execution for the most part. I feel like where this album shined was the writing and the instrumental performances from both Jack and Meg. Other than that, I get wanting to have that raw and unfinished sound, and I do think it complements the album on a handful of songs, but I think, like we said, it kind of gets dragged out a little bit to the point where it's like, okay.
Yeah, I with the way that I broke down all these tracks, for me it gives the album a total score of 6.4, which I think fits the actual feeling I have about the album. Again, I agree with you. The first half of it's great. I also think that the highlights of the album are the simplicity behind the deep meaning lyrics in most of the tracks. Another note I made, and this is probably a lot easier to pull off because of the simplicity of the music, but listening to the album, I feel like a lot of the songs may have been recorded in not a whole lot of takes. It didn't sound overworked on the production side. It didn't sound like there was a lot of copy and paste when it came to guitar riffs and drum fills.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, it sounded very much a let's go in, record this song once, and it's done, which I always commend. It takes a lot of talent to be able to pull that off. So that's a highlight for me. And where it struggled, I think, was Aluminum and On. Like we said a million times already, it just killed it, and it was tough to get through after that. So
I did say I like the writing, but I do feel like that's kind of the weak point of the album sometimes as well. Again, with like the kind of repetition of the same theme over and over and over again. I think having one theme for an album is awesome. And I think to pull off an entire album with one theme and make it sound interesting all the way through is super admirable. And like you said, takes a lot of talent and creativity. But yeah, almost half of the album, I feel like kind of lost that juice for me. So I think overall, I gave this album a 6.7. So that's going to do it for the album review. Let's get into this movie review, shall we?
We shall.
Movie time!
Jojo Rabbit was directed by Taika Waititi, written by Taika Waititi, and Christine Lunens. Released in 2019, Jojo Rabbit dives deep into the world of 1940s Germany in the closing months of World War II, just before the Allied powers overpowered the Axis powers by powdering their power hour after hour, towering over as the other side cowers. We see the world through the eyes of an enthusiastic young Nazi boy who has been seriously indoctrinated by barbaric beliefs. I was able to see this movie in theaters. I think I caught the last probably 2 weeks or so of the theatrical release because when I went to go see it, I was one of 4 or 5 people in my theater. It was me and a bunch of old dudes. And this movie was actually based on a book called Caging Skies, which was actually written by Christine Lunens, who has a writing credit for the screenplay for the movie. So I kind of just assumed that these guys were people that had heard of the book and then saw that there was a movie coming out based on it. I would describe it as a dark comedy. So it's a very funny movie, but in the theater, I was like the only one laughing. So I kept thinking like, oh shoot, am I not supposed to be laughing at this movie? But I was like, no, because it's funny. So yeah, I'm supposed to be laughing. You know, it's created to obviously highlight the ridiculous nature of Nazi beliefs. It even features Taika Waititi, the director, as an imaginary low-wit Hitler who is Jojo's kind of BFF.
Whenever I have suggested this movie to people in the past, I usually describe it as a dark satirical comedy on World War II Germany, which I think when you say that, sometimes it can kind of put people off because it's really not something to be joked about.
No.
But I feel like Taika Waititi in this movie walks the line of joking too much about something serious and joking about it just enough. He walks that line perfectly.
I think even the premise of Taika writing this movie was he heard like the synopsis of the book, and what he thought in his mind as he saw or read the synopsis is probably what we got in the movie. So, spoiler warning for Jojo Rabbit. If you haven't watched the movie yet and you'd like to watch it before we review it, go watch it, come back to the episode. You have been warned. But towards the end of the movie, Jojo tells Elsa, who is the Jewish refugee that's taken shelter in their home. At this point, Jojo has befriended her, but the war ends. Germany loses the war, and she asks Jojo, who won the war? And he says, Germany won the war. And she's like, Germany won the war? And he's like, yeah, Germany totally won the war. They don't say like how long they're in the house after the war ends in the movie, but in the book, he keeps her captive for like 10 years.
Really?
And he like manipulates her, he lies to her and stuff, and he even kind of gets this like very disturbing kind of like almost married couple type of situation with her, even though they're far from that and she's literally a refugee. I didn't read the book, but reading about the book, like kind of skimming through some reviews, the book is a lot darker, which I think a lot of people who did read the book and also watch the movie seem to appreciate the movie a little bit more because it's less dark, just because I think thematically it kind of fits the story better to almost make fun of what's going on rather than to describe it in detail and like completely lay it out.
I did not know that, and I'm glad that Taika
Yeah.
Waititi decided not to do that in the movie because
Yep.
I think that would have ruined it.
100%. Well, I mean, you think about like, you know, the same guy that directed Thor Ragnarok in 2017, 2 years later comes out with this movie. I think people would have been like, what the heck if he did Thor Ragnarok and then turned around and did this like deep, low key, like psychological horror film about Nazi Germany, you know?
Yeah, I think the movie in its entirety is, like I said, it walks a line of comedy without disrespecting the history behind the Holocaust and World War
Yeah.
II. But it's also very informational. I think it's very insightful into how brainwashed the people were who followed Hitler and his beliefs.
It makes me think about the book that it's based on too, you know, because it's like, okay, well, if someone who as a young child is open and willing to believe these crazy beliefs. It's not that much of a surprise that them growing into an adult, they would continue that kind of like, manipulative behavior and kind of treat someone else that way too, you know? The film follows Johannes Betzler, or Jojo, or I guess in the movie they kind of all have like German accent, so he's like Johannes Betzler. Jojo is 10 years old and dreams of being in Hitler's personal guards. He's a Nazi fanatic and he attends a youth camp designed to basically indoctrinate these ideologies into the minds of these young children. In the movie, they kind of play it up to be like, obviously this is ridiculous because they talk about these kids and these people thought of, this other race of people as not human. They almost thought of them as like animals. I just don't know how much to lean into the whole like Nazi and Jewish thing with this movie.
No, I'm with you. I actually have a note here because most of the notes I wrote last night, I just said like Jew, and I don't know if it's wrong or right or indifferent to just say the word Jew or if you're supposed to say.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like a Jewish person is probably more the correct way to refer, to Jewish people. Yeah.
I think so too. That's part of this whole movie is them. When I say them, I'm talking about the entire cast, the people, the characters in this movie, so over exaggerating the ridiculous concepts of the thought process and the beliefs behind the people who believed in what Hitler wanted. So much so that it does become comedic at times, but it is very much what they believed, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and it's almost like talking about the movie. I'm like hearing myself. I'm like, what am I talking about?
Yeah, it's a tough thing to listen to unless you've seen the movie.
Definitely.
It's a lot easier to understand when you've seen the movie. And really, the movie opens up right off the rip, showing Jojo standing there talking to himself with his imaginary friend Hitler in the back, played
Yeah.
by Taika Waititi, who, by the way, doesn't really fully get rid of his New Zealand accent.
Yeah.
It's like a New Zealand German mix of an accent, which I
Yeah.
think he might do a little bit on purpose to keep it more comedic.
Definitely.
But right off the rip, in that opening scene with Jojo and his imaginary friend Hitler, it spells out, it tells you right away, this movie is going to be about Hitler as an imaginary friend to this kid in a Nazi camp training to be a soldier, but it's not going to be a straightforward movie. It's satirical, is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's something to remember too. Is like with this movie, and with the review of it too. None of it is actually how the people who made this movie. Nobody feels the way that these characters feel, and us reviewing the movie, we don't feel this way either. Because
Correct.
again, it's obviously ridiculous that people ever thought this way or felt this way. So keep that in mind. I think I also am going to have to just keep that in mind for myself. Talking about the movie, it's what the movie is, and the movie has no issue displaying itself as what it is. So, as a reviewer, we'll try our best to not get too caught up in the terms and everything, but we'll just try our best to give you our straight up reviews and thoughts.
Yep.
But anyway, going back into it, they're at this youth camp and having this wild experience for a youth camp. It makes me think of like scout camp that we went to when we were younger.
I wrote the same exact thing down. And what I wrote about it is that going to scout camp and high adventure camp stuff growing up, it felt so normal. Like it was just
Yeah.
part of growing up. And so
Yeah.
it makes you wonder if they really were sending kids to these types of camps. It probably didn't feel like anything crazy to them.
Right. So I saw there was an interview, this lady, she was like an actual like Hitler youth camp attendee, and this journalist watched Jojo Rabbit with her, and like at the end of it she got like emotional because she was just like, that's real, like that's how it was. And she said in her interview, you turn 10 and you're in that part of the world. She was like, that's what you did. Like you turned 10 and that's just kind of what you did. Yeah, it's wild. But genuinely these people thought this way. It's just crazy. But anyway, while on his way to camp, Jojo meets up with his best friend, Yorkie, who bunks up with Jojo at camp. I freaking love Yorkie, dude. He's so funny.
He is, yeah, one of my
Yeah,
favorite characters in this
yeah.
whole movie.
I know. I remember we watched, I think it was the four of us. It was me, you, Shelby, your wife, and then our sister. I think the four of us watched this movie together a while ago. And the scene where Jojo blows himself up with a grenade at the camp.
Yeah.
and Yorkie is screaming. I remember Shelby like dying at that part.
Yeah, and she did again last night when we watched this movie.
It's
As a
funny.
refresh for this episode, yeah, we watched it again last night, and yeah, right after that happened, she was dying laughing, and she said that was the most exciting part of this movie that I was waiting for, and it is hilarious.
It is very funny. I mean, and on the topic of the actors and stuff, amazing performances from these kid actors. Like
Yep.
crazy that even the kid that plays Jojo, I'm going to search up his name right now, unless you have it.
Roman Griffin Davis.
Him as a child being able to film this movie with like as much nuance as he has in his performance is insane.
Yeah, agreed.
And again for the actor that played Yorkie as well. Like Yorkie's just so dry and his humor is just so flat, but it's so funny. So they bunk up at camp and Jojo kind of gets picked on because there's a point where like the older kids are like, "Do you have what it takes to face down your enemy and to kill them if you need to?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And so they ask Jojo specifically, and he's like, "Yeah, I love killing." And so then they give him a rabbit to kill, and he can't do it. He can't bring himself to kill the rabbit, so he kind of like puts it on the ground and like shoos it away. And so then the older boys start making fun of him and they start a chant calling him Jojo Rabbit, hence the name of the movie. But he runs away, has a little meeting with his imaginary friend Hitler. It's just so like straight to the point where Jojo's like, "Sorry, Hitler, I couldn't kill the rabbit for you." And Taika as Hitler is just like, "Don't even worry about it. It's nothing."
Yeah.
It's just so stupid.
Well, and what I find interesting is that in that moment, he actually suggests that Jojo be more like a rabbit. You know, having the courage of a rabbit to go do what it has to do and not worry about what's around him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely funny. The very casual, sorry Hitler. Yeah,
Sorry, Hitler. I couldn't kill this rabbit. He's like, I literally couldn't care less.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so then Jojo steals a hand grenade and blows himself up during an exercise, like a training exercise. And his body now mildly deformed, he returns home with his mother, Rosie, who's played by Scarlett Johansson. And Jojo's assigned to like deliver mail, like war conscriptions, which I think is like pretty much just like what happens if like someone gets drafted.
Probably, yeah.
He delivers mail and hangs up like propaganda just kind of all over the town. And so we follow him during his first little shift of this, and he returns home and discovers that there is a Jewish girl hiding in the attic. And her name is Elsa. She's played by Thomasin McKenzie. She tells Jojo that Rosie, Jojo's mother, invited her into the home to take sanction. And so Jojo's like, there's no way she would have done that. What are you doing in my house? He even like thinks about calling the Gestapo. So the Gestapo was basically like the secret state police. Google's saying that they served as Hitler's main instrument of torture and horror. So that's fun. Basically, they, come and investigate. People at that time would call them and say like, I think there's people hiding here, or, you need to come investigate this. And so they would basically go and check out these things. So Jojo almost threatens to call them, and Elsa's like, go ahead, do it. You guys are gonna die too because you were, in on it.
Yep.
So Jojo's like, I don't know what to do. So then he he tries to like negotiate with her, and that goes over about as well as you would imagine.
Yep.
But he has like a pot on his head, and he takes up a knife, and she ends up taking the knife from him.
Yeah.
And so then he like goes downstairs, I think, to kind of regroup with imaginary Hitler. I know at some point he ends up back upstairs with an even bigger knife.
Yeah.
And he knocks on the wall because she's kind of hiding in like a side panel in the wall.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You, little Jew girl in the wall." And then she just pops up behind him with the other knife. Or no, she pops up behind him, scares him. He drops the knife. She picks it up and she's like, "Get out of my room." Jojo kind of over the movie has to figure out what to do about this girl who's hiding in their house. As the movie goes on, he kind of starts to treat Elsa like a human because she is. And he starts to write, in his words, what is an expose on Jews titled Yoo-Hoo Jew.
Yeah, I think that throughout the conversation of Jojo and Elsa, when he first finds her hiding in the walls of his home, They bicker back and forth about him finding her and wanting to go tell the police, and her essentially telling him, like you already said, that go ahead, if you do, then we're all gonna die. So he's writing this book, Uhuju, his expose, and as he's writing this book, Elsa is feeding him all of this false information
Yeah.
about these fake powers that Jewish people have
Yeah.
to manipulate and hypnotize people with their minds and whatever. And she's totally
Yeah.
feeding into his make believe ideologies that Jewish people are bad people, which makes the book even funnier because even though he's writing it, she essentially feeds him most of the information that he writes about.
Yeah. The lines that are delivered in this movie, like comedically, are just delivered so perfectly. We haven't touched yet. Sam Rockwell is in this movie, which I think Sam Rockwell is probably one of my favorite actors, but he is so freaking funny in this movie. He plays a Captain Clintendorf, I think. He's just basically a dumb captain who gets put in charge of all these kids, and as Jojo continues to be around him, he continues to get demoted because Jojo just keeps doing stuff that he's in charge of. We also haven't touched a whole lot on Rosie yet, Jojo's mom.
Yep.
This is probably my favorite Scarlett Johansson role. I was reading a review that said like she didn't do a good job or something. I was like, are you kidding me? I think she crushes it. I think she does a really good job at playing Nazi fanatic. Yeah, I think she gives a really good performance throughout the whole movie. I think she's funny. I think her jokes land. A lot of like slapstick comedy in this movie too, which I really appreciate as well.
Yep.
I think the one interaction she has with Sam Rockwell is pretty funny.
I agree. Yeah, I think she does a great job. And her character, Rosie, and Sam Rockwell's character, Captain K, they are secretly part of essentially the resistance, which is why Elsa is being hidden in Jojo's house
Yeah.
because Rosie, his mom, is hiding her there. She's to keep her safe. But even Rosie herself is afraid to let Jojo know that she's there, even though Jojo's a kid, because of his extreme, again, exaggerated, dramatized beliefs. She does a great job at navigating, playing along with the insane idea of Nazi Germany, while also trying to keep this girl safe. Touching on her being Jojo's mom, she plays it very, very well. There's a scene, and I may be jumping a little bit ahead here too far, but there's a scene where it's kind of actually funny in and of itself. Jojo knows that Elsa's there, but he doesn't want his mom to know. And Rosie, his mom, doesn't know that Jojo knows that she's there. And Rosie and Jojo are sitting at their dining room table and they're eating dinner. And Rosie is drinking a glass of wine, and Jojo notices that she's not eating her food. And he says, "Why aren't you eating your food?" Knowing that the answer is so that she can go take it to Elsa later. But he says, "Why aren't you eating your food?" And I think it's hilarious. She says, "Oh, I'm not that hungry, so I'll just chew on these grapes for now." While she drinks her wine.
Yeah.
In that same scene, Jojo kind of gets upset with his mom. And it's not the first time we hear his dad mentioned, but he says something about, "I wish dad was here." Maybe you picked up on something else, so I could be wrong, so correct me if I am. But the picture that's painted of Jojo's dad by some of the kids in the camp is that he essentially ran away from the war because he was scared to fight. Later on, I think we find out that he was actually helping with the resistance.
Yeah.
But according to in Jojo's mind, he's this hero who is at war and he's fighting, but he's also kind of battling himself with this idea that maybe he was a coward, maybe he ran away.
Right.
Anyway, so going back to the dining room scene, Jojo gets mad at his mom and he says, "I just wish dad were here." And Rosie essentially says, "You wish your dad was here?" And she walks over to the fireplace and she grabs some ash and she rubs it on her face to make it look like a beard. And she has this couple of minutes where she plays both his dad and his mom. I think it's a huge nod to mothers in general doing what they have to do to keep their kids happy, because she could have very easily said, "Your dad, he ran off, or he did this, or he was a terrible person," or whatever the case may be, but instead paints this picture for Jojo of his dad being there with him when Jojo expressed wanting him there. And I just think it's a really touching moment on her part to do that for him.
Especially at that time too, like in the world.
Yeah.
Imagine being a single parent at that time. That would be so hard to do.
Yep.
And especially doing what Rosie does, which is trying to help other children who probably don't have their parents, like Elsa, because we learned that Elsa's parents were taken away at a train station, which, if you know the very basic level of history about World War II and the Holocaust and everything that happened there, it's implied that her parents get taken on a train probably to the Auschwitz camp. She even tells Jojo, my parents went to a place where you don't come back from, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, this conversation takes place later in the movie. And actually, let's touch on something else, something kind of major while we're on the topic of Rosie. Before I finish my thoughts here, throughout the movie, we see Rosie, working with this resistance. We see her leave a flyer, like on someone's front doorstep, that says "Free Germany." After the Gestapo visit, they even ask, during the visit, they ask Jojo, "Is your mom home a lot?" And he says she is quite busy. I'm sure that the Gestapo were there because they heard something about Rosie.
Yep.
And so they were there to investigate. But earlier in the movie, there's a scene where Rosie takes Jojo to the town square, and they have a gallows set up where there are a few people that have been hung who are part of this Free Germany resistance group. And Rosie shows Jojo to basically see, like, look, this is the world that we live in right now. Jojo wants to look away. He's like, yuck. And he's like, what did they do? And she says, like, they did what they can, basically, or what they could.
Yeah.
Later, Jojo is kind of just on a stroll gathering food for him and Elsa. Jojo's kind of roaming around this same town square, and he's following this butterfly. The butterfly flies away, and he looks up, and the camera kind of pans with him, and we see Rosie's feet hanging from the same gallows, and we know it's her because in the few shots in the movie, we see like her red and white shoes. And there's even a theme not a theme, but just kind of a thing in the plot where Jojo doesn't know how to tie his shoes. And so one of her shoes is untied, and he tries to tie it while her body's just kind of there. It cuts to these really interesting shots of houses or buildings like in the town square
Yeah.
that I've always interpreted as like the world now has its eyes on Jojo. Like,
Yeah.
not specifically, oh, these houses are sentient and are now watching this child. It's like, our eyes are on you now, Jojo. Like, you see what your own ideologies and beliefs, this is what it does to people. The closest person in your life that you have, your own mother, have been killed now because of these just insane ideologies and these crazy thoughts and beliefs. It makes for a really, really sad moment. You've been laughing pretty much the whole time up to this point, right?
Yeah.
And then that happens, and it's like a punch in the gut almost. It's like, oh my gosh. And so Jojo goes home, and he's got his like dagger that he got from the very beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
and he tries to stab Elsa just out of pure grief. His initial thought process is to just hurt the person that, in his mind, is responsible for his mom getting killed.
Yeah. He's lashing out. He's trying to find somebody to blame, and Elsa is the
Absolutely.
first person he looks to.
Yeah. And Elsa, again, being just a human being, sees that he's hurting, and she, goes over to comfort him. And yeah, it's honestly kind of jarring to go from like, oh, ha ha ha, I love this movie, it's so funny, to then it's like, no, like this actually happened to people,
Yeah. Yeah. Very
And
much so. Yep. What I was just gonna say, where now the Nazis are essentially just giving it everything they've got. Germany's been
yeah,
invaded.
yep,
Hitler has taken his own life,
yeah,
and which is funny because at that point, Jojo's imaginary Hitler stopped showing up momentarily, anyway.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
essentially, the war is coming to an end.
yeah.
Germany is losing the war, and so the Nazis are giving it all they got, which is where Jojo runs into Yorkie again. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So they have this interaction. Yorkie's helping carrying like like a rocket launcher.
A
And
giant
so
one, yeah, a big
yeah,
one.
it takes two little kids to be carrying this thing. And Jojo's like, Yorkie! And Yorkie's like, Jojo! And he drops the back half of the rocket launcher, which launches the rocket loaded in the launcher just into a building and just completely obliterates this building. Jojo and Yorkie kind of, go back and forth, and they're talking about, the end of the war, and Yorkie tells Jojo that, yeah, Hitler, in his words, blew his brains out. There's a brief little part where they're talking about how the Allied powers have taken over Germany, but Yorkie's talking about how, like, he's like, I heard Russians eat babies and have sex with dogs. So Jojo's like, oh my gosh. It's like the Englishmen do it too. We need to stop them before they eat our babies and screw all our dogs. It's so funny. So we kind of come towards the end of the movie. There's this last hurrah effort by the Germans. During the sequence, there's a song called, I think it's just called Everybody. The first time I heard this song, it was a cover actually from Mac Miller. He did a cover of it on his album titled Circles. Yeah, so the song originally written and performed by Arthur Lee in 1972. And I thought Mac Miller wrote that song. And so then watching this movie after that song came out, I was like, yo, did they cover a freaking Mac Miller song for this movie? And then I found out that Mac Miller's version was a cover. So then during the last battle, it's kind of hard to watch because they show, again, probably what was the reality of children going out with guns and grenades and just all these different people in Germany brainwashed into thinking that they were on the correct side of history here. The war's over. Jojo's kind of strolling through the city, and he's got this jacket on that basically marks him as a member of like the German forces. And so there's Russian and American troops around the city gathering up the remaining German forces. What I assume is to execute them all. They see Jojo. He's got this German forces jacket on, and they grab him and they throw him in an alley or a back street, whatever, with this other group of German force members. It's then we see Captain Klenzendorf back. He's beaten up. He looks horrible. That was another thing that I forgot to bring up too, was during the Gestapo visit,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Elsa reveals herself to the Gestapo and to Captain K as Jojo's dead sister, Inya, I think is how you say it. But no one really knows that Jojo's sister had died. And so Elsa kind of takes the role of his sister during this Gestapo visit, and they ask to see her papers. So she grabs the papers, gives them to Captain K, and he's like, when's your date of birth? And she says the 1st of May. And he's like, correct, here you go. So then they leave, and Elsa is like, it's the 7th of May. And Jojo's like, what? And she goes, she was born on the 7th, not the 1st. Yeah, we get that first glimpse of Captain K really being on the side of Jojo here. He's just trying to protect this kid at this point. They throw Jojo kind of in this alleyway next to Captain K, and Captain K kind of reassures him and comforts him a little bit, and he strips Jojo of the German forces jacket and kind of throws it and pushes Jojo, and he's like, get away from me, kind of saying like, I don't know who this kid is. And so then he saves Jojo in that moment too, and he tells Jojo, even, go home and take care of your sister, which I think he knows that's not actually his sister. But
Yeah.
I love Sam Rockwell, but I also love Captain K. He's funny, but again, he also, at the very last moment of his life before he gets executed, shows that kind of side of a little bit of brief humanity. The movie closes with Jojo and Elsa leaving the house, and Elsa's still under the impression that Germany has won the war. And so they go outside and they're looking around, and Elsa sees, American flags waving, and she turns to Jojo and she slaps him across the face. And he's like, I probably deserve that.
So I know you mentioned at the beginning of this review that the book says that Jojo kept her captive for like 10 years, you said?
Yeah,
Clearly in the movie, there has been some time.
definitely.
It's definitely not that long because they're both the same age, it looks like. But there's clearly been some time because when they go outside, the streets are cleaned up, buildings are rebuilt and put back together. It's not dirty like the war
Right.
had just ended.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I'd probably say like a week or two maybe had passed. And so the movie closes on Jojo and Elsa dancing, which alludes back to a question that Jojo poses to Elsa. And he says, what's the first thing that you'll do once you're free? And Elsa says, dance. And so the movie closes on Jojo and Elsa dancing together, which showcases that Elsa's totally free, and Jojo, as selfish as his actions are, at least now has someone to kind of watch over him while he continues to get older and grow up. I really love this movie. I think this has always been top 3, maybe even top 2 favorite movies of all time for me. I have a Letterboxd account. If you want to go follow me on that, it's at Nick's Mix and Flicks. But this is in my top 4. I think I give this movie a 9.
I've only watched this movie one or two other times before this, and it was not long after it came out, so it's been a few years. And I always remembered it being a good movie. I never considered it to be in my top 5 or even 10, but after watching it again and paying more attention in the mindset of knowing we were going to be doing this review, I have it at a 9.5 out of 10. And I don't even know why I don't have it at a 10. In my mind, it probably is a 10, but I feel like 9.5 just felt right. But yeah, this is by far one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's because it gives a lot of things I like. It gives humor, it gives emotion, it provides some history, which I also like. Yeah, overall, Taika Waititi killed it. I think he put together a great movie here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I give it a 9 just because I don't think I'll know a 10 out of 10 movie until I see it. Yeah, I love this movie so much, but I think that's going to do it for the movie review as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Nick's Mix and Flicks. Thank you, Justin, for coming on and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We actually, a few years ago, were going to start a podcast with the two of us and our sister, but it just never panned out. And so it's super cool to be able to have him on this podcast to kind of see what it would have been like if we had pursued that other one.
I'm super proud of you. I'm super happy to see you're doing this. I'm going to be one of the very first listeners every time you drop an episode, and I hope you have me on again. But thanks for having me. I think it's great.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is so sweet. You're going to make me cry. But that's going to do it for this episode. If you guys like what you heard, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow the podcast on Spotify at Nick's Mix and Flicks and on YouTube at Nick's Mix and Flicks YT. Let me know what other reviews you want to see, what movies you want to hear about, what music you want to hear about. Leave it in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about the episode. Other than that, we're going to head out. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Yeah, when I hear music, got to talk about it. Got me a collection of movies that I can watch a lot of. If that's not your suit, at least try it on for a fit. You gotta tune into this Nick's Mix and Flicks.
Hi, Mom.